I think I've got that
That's
right.
you. I think you hit that right on the head.
It's like I made some notes. Hello and welcome to episode 101 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing and the F is for, well, you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott, and this weekly podcast that is my excuse to chat with marketing friends old and new that I've met through my career, from techie to CMO, and hopefully share with you some marketing street knowledge that my guests and I have picked up along the way. Come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn, and a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network. This episode was recorded on Friday the 11th of February. I hope you've had a good week and you are well, safe and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. This week we continue my interview with Jeff Clark. I get to dig into influencer marketing with fellow NPN podcaster Gordon Glenister, and we wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with Robert Rose for a cocktail and a marketing thought. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
After this word, we'll be right back. After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Right, on to our first segment. If you're a regular listener, you'll be familiar with the wise words of Jeff Clark, former research director at Serious Decisions Forrester and principal strategic advisory here at Rockstar CMO, as we regularly chew the fat on various marketing topics. To celebrate episode 100 last week, I thought it was time we shared a bit more about where this wisdom came from, get the insider tips from his industry career and through his time advising an amazing roster of clients, and share with you a bit about the Jeff Clark I know. Of course, we went too long, so we decided to split the conversation into two. Last week, we covered his early career and tips from his time at various well-known B2B technology vendors, and we rejoin as we dig into his experience as an analyst. As we didn't plan to split the interview, you'll have to bear with my edit as we jump straight back in.
That usually was one of the key sources from problems, because people with an older vision or a different vision still existed and couldn't get aligned.
Yeah. It's back to the point you were making just now about your experience actually being in-house, wasn't it? About your quote there, "Good plan well executed is better than a perfect plan poorly executed." I think I've got that right.
You. I think you hit that right on the head.
It's like I made some notes. So it's, I mean, the primary thing you saw then as an advisor for these organizations was about having that agreed plan and execution rather than like coming at this thing from different directions and getting that structure together. And did you see like real differences when you started to get organizations aligned that, that must be very satisfying?
Absolutely. I mean, there was, and there were a couple companies that I was involved in sort of like helping them tell their story, and I was loosely involved in the actual advisory part because, and one of the great things about the model we had was that, different advisors could come in and, take one problem and have different people come in and talk about it. But there were, particularly from the focus on aligning around campaign strategies. I mean, you would see companies where, engagement, all the stats would just go up. We're getting better engagement. We're doing, one of the keys is we're doing less tactical work and getting better results. And then, when sales and marketing are kind of aligned along that same go-to-market approach, I mean, then you lose the friction that you would typically get from sales and marketing about the people in sales going, I mean, these people are sending all this stuff out, and it's nothing. It doesn't mean anything to my customer. Yeah. Or the salespeople aren't following up on all of the, all the activity,
all the things we've heard, things you've heard. Yeah. No, I agree. What do you so if I was let's imagine I'm a brand new CMO in a B2B organization or a senior leader of a B2B organization,
which you are, but we don't have to imagine that.
Well, let's imagine that. And then what do you think? Yeah, I'm not using this as a free consultancy, honestly, Jeff.
Yeah, because you get that before we get on the call.
So what are a few things you think that people should focus on, marketing teams should focus on, some of the key tactics to I mean, clearly, planning, strategy, aligning people is a tough job, but what other sort of things do you think we need to be doing?
Well, I think that I mean, to sort of continue a theme I started with here is that the primary and secondary research into understanding the customer, I mean, it for one, it's essential, but it can help for different parts of the marketing team, so like, win-loss analysis. I know you're going to have one of my former colleagues talk about that soon. Talking a lot to third-party analysts. I mean, certainly when I was, at one of the software companies, we'd be talking to Forrester and Gartner and, asking them about what they're hearing, doing your own focus groups, doing brand studies.
Right.
I was always amazed that we would do a brand study and we'd feed the information back to executives and they'd be like, yeah, right. They and it's like, well, my gosh, we interviewed like 150 people and got all this detailed and they think we're good here, we suck here, whatever. And it's like, and then they pull out their anecdote that would try to put a hole in it. But also doing which I think has been more of a trend recently, customer journey analysis. Where do you touch customers? Who's touching them between sales, support, marketing, and I think all of those things are just incredibly important. It's almost like you'd say, hey, let's stop doing any marketing for the next 2 to 3 months, and just everybody dives in and does some aspect of researching, pulling research together from various sources, and see if we can come up with a picture of our customers and how we should be talking to them. Because that, it's like, there's the old adage of changing the engines while the plane's in flight, and it's hard to do. But if you ever get that opportunity, I would take advantage of it.
But I also think, and that is, you start asking why around the business about why, because you can do that when you're new, right? You can say, well, why do you think that? Why is it? And try and drive and find the data. And if there isn't any, then you quickly run out of whys, don't you? It's just, because we do it that way. It's like, okay, right. Okay, so
there was one company we worked with where they did a lot of research, and they came up with a list of customer needs. And they ranked them based on what they knew internally they were good at and what worked with the customer in terms of how to phrase the need, and they just developed their whole campaign architecture around it. And again, it's like you could see the stats. It's like,
absolutely,
absolutely. Brings everything together.
Absolutely. All right. Well, so I'm going to keep on with the questions that I prepared. I didn't realize I was going to take this direction where it was actually a personal strategy session, consulting session. But the question I wanted to ask you, and I know we both have to be careful with this because we have had some of our bosses on the show, right? So, without naming names, what makes up the qualities of a rockstar B2B CMO in your experience with some of the folks?
Is that why they won't hire us again? I don't know.
Well, they came on the show. I don't know.
That's right. So, I mean, a couple things certainly come to mind, and I think a solid role understanding of marketing's role within a
Mhm.
company, which is obviously different from company to company. And if you're in
Yeah.
a software versus a electric utility versus a,
Yeah.
whatever, it's the
Yeah.
marketing is going to be different. So kind of understanding what that should be,
Yeah.
and then also what it is, because
Yeah.
if somebody comes on
Yeah.
board and they're doing their 90-day plan based on
Mhm.
the book, which I can't remember the title of it, but it's like the 90 whatever
First 90 days.
first 90 days. And and it's like, you want to talk to people to get an understanding of what they think marketing should be. I know, one of our previous bosses said, that was a really eye opener for him in terms of understanding what was expected as marketing's contribution. But you do also want to understand kind of where it should be, because over time you want to migrate from perhaps where it is to and so I think taking that journey is part of the CMO creating a tight bond with the executive team. I mean, there was one CMO, actually, I don't think he was a CMO when I was working for him, but he was virtually operating that way. And then he had a couple of CMO positions after that. And he had a very tight bond with the executive team as a contributor. I mean, not as just as I'm the marketing guy on the team, but as contributing, his analysis. And I know when he left, it's like, it was funny because he was not known as sort of like a great marketing mind, but again, he was able to contribute with the executive team, understand what the decided strategy was, and then how we were supposed to execute that. And
I've had that conversation here with an executive coach about CMOs, that you can't sit in those meetings just as the most senior marketer. And bring you've got to contribute to the company strategy, right?
I know, a lot of CMOs go in and it's like, okay, we're going to rebrand. We're going to, we're going to talk about the new us. We're going to blah, 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 blah. And it's like, so often that's not the problem. And so really understanding, being an active participant in the company strategy. So that's really what that comes down to. And then you got to, motivate your direct reports to think outside their comfort zones, because, typically, direct reports are in functional positions, comms, PR, digital, blah, 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 blah. And it's like the leaders in particular all have to be thinking about, if we're focused on certain customer sets or partner sets or whatever, how we're working across our teams to affect that, as opposed to, working in our silos. And then, the last thing is really good CMOs I've seen do try to connect with everybody at the various levels of the department. I mean, they don't just have their team meetings and then expect the teams to go off and do their thing. And they don't necessarily, talk to the event coordinator until they're on the stage at the user conference.
And understand the needs of the people on the ground who are actually doing the work, is what you're saying there, isn't it?
Well, and they, you want to be able to have comfortable conversations up and down, and that's true for the CEO as well. It's not just true for the CMO.
No, that's great. So some good advice there for budding CMOs. One thing I did want to do, and we're crazy running out of time as usual when we chat, and but what I wanted to do was touch on your passion for the topic of climate change, because it's kind of like weird, isn't it? Because it's where you started. You were telling us about that was the beginning of your career, and of course, regular listeners will know that sometimes you take a break from the show to go do that stuff. And tell us a bit about that work and what's your passion there and what it is you do.
Well, it's one thing that just popped in my mind is when I was running the New Hampshire Solar Energy Association back in the early 80s. We had a bumper sticker saying "Solar energy, the future is now." And then as funding for solar projects, certainly for a public level, was going away, and as the industry was kind of withering because the price of oil, all the various dynamics that were changing back then, I would often quip, solar energy, the future was last decade. But now I can honestly say that from a cost competitive standpoint and ease of implementation, et cetera, the future is definitely today, or it's actually been here for a few years. And so I think, so one of the passions is just seeing that all of that technology that was being developed, back in those days, really coming to fruition and broadly. Right. I mean, I'm where I am in central Massachusetts. I mean, every farm's got big solar collectors. Every, our University of Massachusetts has every parking lot's got, the panels that hang over it. And so it's, so, I mean, it's just, it's certainly motivating to see that happen, but it's just like we're in this 10-year race where it's like we're supposed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50%, and everybody's dragging their feet. And I do a lot of work on the state level from a legislation perspective, because I firmly believe that policy, it's kind of like the market dynamics are kind of there, but the policies are actually really more tilted towards the old way of doing business with fossil fuels. So it's like we got to change those. At any time there's a real issue of things not changing properly, it's usually because of a bad incentive structure, and so we've got to change that. So that's the thing I'm really been focused on the last couple of years.
So that's good for the Jeff Clark fans. It's good to know what you're up to when you're not here. Finally, mate, as you know, and I think you've answered this question before, we have a regular feature on the Rockstar CMO called Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool, in tribute to all the rock stars that threw things in hotel swimming pools that the young kids don't remember. But it's our portal to marketing hell for the overtype trends, BS, and snake oil from the marketing industry we love. What would you like to see chucked into our pool?
I was just remembering the last year I threw account-based marketing to the pool.
You did?
Because I said all B2B marketing is account-based and selling. And I pulled Agile out of the pool.
You did. I put that in
because you threw it in. I pulled it out. Somebody since has probably thrown it back in. I mean, there's so many things, and I think the pool's frankly, a bit full at this point. But the thing I was thinking about was actually not a new hype thing, but kind of an old thing, because as I was my last couple of years at Sirius Decisions, I mean, we were trying to throw the lead funnel into the pool and talk more about, there's just this shared engagement between marketing, sales, and any other customer facing function that needs to be followed more than we're starting with whatever 1,000 marketing interactions, and we're winnowing it down to what the opportunities are. It's just a much more complicated process than that. And actually, you go back, we go back to the earlier days of marketing where everything was account based. It's like it was sales marketing working together to increase the brand awareness, preference, and engagement with customers. And so that's the way we should be thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think we did chat about the lead funnel, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, and the fact that this physical thing and it doesn't exist. I think we made reference to Squid Games because we're down with the cool kids, so that's perfect. So we'll be chucking that into the brimming Rockstar CMO swimming pool. And it's a bit of an amalgamation this week, Jeff, because normally I don't ask my guests that I interview for a song choice, but since it's you and we normally have a song choice from you, what have you got for us this week?
I was thinking about, because this was we were talking about the 20 questions the interview, as I was thinking about, songs that deal with questions. And unfortunately, I know we like to be as contemporary as possible, but the song machine was spitting out everything from 1960. And so one of my favorite tunes from my hometown of Chicago is questions 67 and 68, which I don't think we actually got that high, but hey, might as well throw it in there anyway. Yeah,
by Chicago from 1968.
Oh,
wow! We were doing so well. We got up to 2009 last week.
Well, next week, I promise you.
We'll go in the future. So I'll play out with question 67, 68 by Chicago, which to be honest with you, I need to look up. 1968. Thank you very much for your time, Jeff. Thanks for sharing your story. And will you be on next week?
Yes. I think we're back on education.
Yes, we should get back to education. I'll speak to you then, mate. Cheers. Thank you.
Can this feeling that we
that was questions 67 and 68 by Chicago from 1968. I don't actually think I've ever heard that song before. So thank you, Jeff, for that and some absolute gems of advice from our interview. We'll be back to our normal pontifications next week. And I will, of course, include all of Jeff's links in the show notes that you can find at rockstarcmo.fm. Right, on to my guest. Gordon Glenister runs his own global influencer marketing program, helping individuals be the go-to person in their niche. He is a global leader on influencer marketing and has been featured in the Thinkers 360 Top Global Leaders on PR, is a highly regarded keynote speaker, host and panelist. Gordon is the host of Influence, the global podcast, and author of the best-selling book, Influencer Marketing Strategy. He has co-founded a number of trade associations, including the Influence Division of the Branded Content Marketing Association, the Meetings and Events Support Association, and Membership World. Gordon is an active blogger and writes for the London Evening Standard and numerous other publications. Hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Gordon, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. So pleased to see you, bouncing and bubbly.
Well, I've had me cup of tea, a couple of cups of coffee. I'm in good shape. So,
good. No, absolutely.
And where are we chatting to you from today, Gordon?
So I live just outside of Cambridge. It's a beautiful part of the world, little village. I've got 4 lakes on my doorstep here, and it's been great, particularly in lockdown, to be able to have somewhere where you can, go and have a nice walk. And it's what I call, actually, it's an RSPB nature reserve. It's what I call a service station for birds.
Wow, that sounds awesome. So
we do have the most amazing birds from all around the world that literally almost nest, breed, and then fly on to the North Pole or whatever. So it's quite a lovely place to have so close. And then I'm not that far away. I go down to London quite a bit, so it's nice to be able to just jump on a train. So I like that, the mixture of the vibe of London plus the tranquility of where I live.
Yeah, I don't have a bird sanctuary, but I'm out in Oxfordshire as well. So, I mean, you're probably the most local guest I've spoken to for ages. So we're both in the same country, probably both suffering the same grey weather today as well. So we always got to mention the weather.
It is.
But for folks that don't know you, Gordon, I've had the pleasure of chatting to you a few times. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Right, great. Well, it's lovely to be on the show. I mean, my background is quite varied, very much a sort of sales and marketing area. I've worked in sold matches for a living. I've worked in the drinks industry, cider and beer in particular. I've had my own incentive company, and I've also run a trade association for 11 years, which is the promotional products industry, where I've got quite a lot of my reputation there as a sort of industry leader. And then in 2018, I left that and started my own consultancy to help other trade associations actually with their strategy and helping improve that. Not thinking for a moment I'd ever end up in the influencer marketing industry. And sometimes things happen, as my mum often says, things happen for a reason. And I met the global head of the Branded Content Marketing Association in Soho in a Charlotte Street hotel. Never forget it. And we were just having a chat about various things. And I just happened to say, who's looking after the influencer space? Who's looking after the agencies, the brands, the influencers themselves? It's a fairly unregulated sector. It's full of lots of challenges. The media has given it a bit of a knock. Who's looking after their interests? And we realized there hadn't been. So anyway, cut a long story short, we set up the influence division of the Branded Content Marketing Association. And that was back in 2019. And since then, I've published a book on influencer marketing strategy. I host my own podcast, which is called Influence, the global podcast, which you know about. Which is obscene. I mean, to be honest, I've never written a book before, never ever really done a podcast. And I now write for the London Evening Standard newspaper. And just everything seems to have happened very positively. And then more recently, I'm also Chief Strategy Officer for Audience to Media, which is a global influencer marketing agency that's got over 100 million people on its platform. I mean, who would have thought these things would happen? And more. I'm involved in my own membership.
I love how you just answered about 3 of my questions in one answer. You can tell a good podcast guest. You're just like bam, bam, bam. That's 3. So why don't we start? I know it wasn't something we prepped for, but why don't we start with the book? I mean, what's the name of your book, and when did you publish it, and what was the process for that?
So, okay, the book was published in March last year. I had it's called Influencer Marketing Strategy. I had. And to be honest, I'll tell you how it all came about, because I was at a show, an exhibition marketing show, and because I entered the influencer marketing space, I just thought the organisation was called Kogan Page. They had a whole load of business books on their stand, and I asked the lady behind the counter, I said, "You got a book on influencer marketing?" And she said, "Well, no, I haven't." So I thought, that's a bit weird. You're a business publication company. You've got books on social media. You've got no books on influencer marketing. And bearing in mind, I was fairly new into the industry per se then. I was building up some connections. So I thought, you know what, it'd be great if I wrote one. So I basically pitched the idea to Kogan Page. And they loved it, and they invited me in. And I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing? You know, I mean, I've got no idea about writing a book, you know. Anyway, as I say, cut a long story short, I got this publishing contract to write a book. And then, of course, it took me quite a while, as you can imagine. And working with a publisher means that you have somebody on your coattails all of the time, each month, but they're also helping you and making sure that you get it right. I think one of my greatest learnings was realizing that actually this book is about a curation of lots and lots of case studies, lots of other thought leaders in the space, which is fundamental, by the way, to influence. You know, you'll never really make everything on your own. You need people. You need your circle of influence. And in a way, I started that whole process with the book. You know, and of course, when it came then to promote it, I've got all of these people that are part of the book that were happily saying, "This is great, Gordon, you know, well done, and let me share it to my audience." And of course, bingo, you know. But the online book launch was something else. I have to say, I was we had 106 people on Zoom to that. I've now subsequently done 2 more book launches as a host for other people, which I've loved. And we made it entertaining, we made it fun, we made it lively. Even the LinkedIn post on the 3rd of March. Can you imagine how important it was for me to get that right? You know, can you imagine if I'd done a LinkedIn post and it dribbled out and nobody saw it? So I used all my tactics to get, and we managed to get to sort of 16,000 views, 241 comments. And of course, that was also because we tagged a lot of the people that were involved in the book as well. And we got lots of comments. I asked a few people to share it on a WhatsApp group. So it was I used everything all together.
Well, nice. Well, congratulations. And from what I understand, having talked to a few authors on the show, and actually I know a couple of people who've written for Kogan Page and really good experience working with that particular publisher. But also, it's not writing the book. That's a lot of effort, but it's promoting the book. It's also a lot of effort, isn't it?
Well, one additional thing that I think is really fascinating here is it's going to be translated. It's already been translated and published in Brazil.
Wow!
And so on the 15th of March, I'm being flown over by the publisher to do a week-long book tour in Brazil. And they want to make it a bestseller over there, which is insane, isn't it? Really, but
I think it's brilliant.
It's such a big audience. I mean, Brazil is the third biggest country for influencer marketing, and we don't have the same competition. So I'm hoping, and they're actually going to make a documentary with me as well, which is fantastic. It's
well, congratulations, and it's testament to the fact that influencer marketing is all a buzz at the moment, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning another book or another author, but I chatted to Jason Falls, author of Winfluence, a couple of episodes ago over the holidays, and he referred to the duck-faced V-sign crowd, which has somewhat tarnished the term, hasn't it? I mean, when people think about influencer marketing, they're thinking about those kids. But how do you define a good influencer marketing program?
Well, it's an interesting question, something I've been asked a lot. And really, let's not kid ourselves. Influencer marketing isn't new. It's like Emperor's New Clothing with a new term. It's fundamentally word of mouth marketing. That's really what it is. It's the ability to promote a product or service through an individual, often through thought leadership, opinion, or basically content creation. And that's how I really describe it. It's as I say, it's not overcomplicated, but what is important is that you find the right person that resonates with your audience, that can promote, sell, or advocate for you. And when done well, influencer marketing can generate 11 times greater ROI than almost any other form of media.
Wow.
And particularly for those individuals that work on ambassador programs. I mean, you have now organizations that have built their entire marketing strategy on influencer marketing, like Boohoo, ASOS, Pretty Little Thing, particularly in the fashion world, but many, many gaming brands. I mean, I interviewed somebody on my podcast a little while ago when they launched a new EA Games. I'm sure you're aware of them, huge global brand. And when they launched one of their brands, they had 250,000 people come online to the reveal of this new game, and in 24 hours it got 2 billion downloads or something crazy, and they used 60 influencer gamers.
Wow. But you also, in the discussion we had before the show, you were talking about how sometimes influencer marketing is used to shape products and create products.
100%. So there's an organization called MG Power, actually, an agency, and they used for a product called Puricane, which is a sugar sweetener. What they did, funny enough, in Brazil, they invited a number of big influencers to a hotel for 3 days, I think it was. And what they wanted to do is to create this new product. And bearing in mind, sometimes products are different in different countries. So you'll find that what works in the United States may not have it's a completely different audience, maybe in South America. So basically what the content creators did was to reach out to their audiences while they were at the hotel. What do you think of this product? What do you think of that design? So they were almost curating this strategy on the fly, but not just with 3 or 4 influencers, but with their entire audience base. So you can imagine when the product actually came to be released, you've almost got a ready-made, excitable audience to say, we've been involved in this. We're actually right behind you.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think Joe Polizzi, who wrote Content Inc., talks about the same thing, is that when you create something, people are going to start giving you feedback, and that's what you need to listen to in terms of shaping your product. And I think that's really interesting.
100%. Well, what's really great about this, when you think of the media, where would a celebrity, where would an individual, where would a brand get real-time feedback? You go and watch something on TV and you think, I hate this TV advert. I'm switching over. I hate it. What I really hate is this. But they're not listening to that. They can't see that because they're detached from it. Whereas actually, you've got real-time feedback, good, bad, indifferent. You've got ideas coming. I mean, I've interviewed fashion content creators, and they've actually said, we love what you're wearing, Josie, but it'd be great if you could also have a look at this type of product or that type of product. Yeah. So some of these fashion influencers then go out and hunt for products like that, so that they can bring those into their next stories or reels or post.
Yeah. But aside from the influencer marketing thing and what we as marketers or brands need to do with influencers, when we were chatting in preparation for the show, we were chatting about the fact that you look at both sides of influencer marketing in terms of, as CMOs and senior marketers, particularly, I mean, that's who my audience is for the podcast. So just to focus on that, there's a view that we need to cultivate a personal brand to be influencers.
100%.
And, nowadays it's part of our value to the market, isn't it? Is our personal brand. So you run a program about that. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm passionate about that. And I guess what I am is probably living proof of somebody that literally entered a market that I was completely unfamiliar with. And I go through a process. So, I always surround myself with my sort of circle of influence. If I want to find out about an industry, I'll often go to a trade association, funny enough, or I'll go to a community and I'll find the heads of those groups. I run a program which is over sort of 3 months on Zoom. It's a one-to-one support coaching, but it's very, very focused on helping individuals becoming more influential. And I go through a process which is the most important thing of all is before you decide what type of content you should be doing, you should start to look at who else is targeting the same sector as you. It's the same old principles of marketing, isn't it? Do your research. You know, we apply the rules with promoting products. Why would we not apply the same rules as ourselves? So for example, you know, what I'd be saying to somebody, doing a simple exercise, and that is get an Excel spreadsheet, have a look at 10 other individuals that you believe are either, you know, somewhat similar to you, and have a look at their last 10 posts. And let's just say you do this on LinkedIn, but you could do it on Twitter, on Instagram, or any of them, and have a look at the what type of posts that they've put out. Is it a post, a video? Is it a stat? Whatever type of thing it is, and then observe what comments and level of engagement they have had back. So can you imagine seeing this on an Excel spreadsheet? Yeah. You've almost got then some amazing attributes which allow you to put this through almost like a washing machine of great content. So that's the first thing I ask people to do, is to have a look at where we are before we even start the race. Think about this as you're going to start the marathon. You wouldn't just go the marathon and go straight off into the sunset. I think my audience would want this. Do not think anything. You know, it's all about doing what, you know, the best influencers and content creators are all over their insights. They know what content works. They know what time it works. They build up to what I call a weekly moment. Everybody should have a weekly moment. That's not like a dance routine. That's something that you do on a regular basis. Go on, sorry.
So again, I mean, I referred to Joe Pulizzi earlier. I mean, that's the same sort of thing that the content marketing crowd talk about, isn't it? That you need to commit and show up on a regular basis so that your audience know where they're going to find you and when, right?
Correct. So mine, for example, I have an influencer marketing roundtable every single Wednesday on Zoom at 8:30 to 9:30. I share loads of tips, but also, so it's half an hour of content and half an hour of conversation. And it absolutely works. We have no more than about 20 people, sometimes 15 or so. It's a very well rehearsed sort of formula. People can duck in and duck out when sometimes they come for one and not the other. They meet people. But I am almost becoming influential, not just because of what I'm dispensing, because I'm seen as the person that's the go-to. So you just said a few minutes ago, didn't you, about we need to be more influential, and some people don't like the term influencer. They don't want to be. They don't want to be the selfie crowd and stuff like that. They don't need to be, right? You don't need to be. You can be that expert. You know, one of my podcasts that I know you've listened to, where we spoke to the head of employee advocacy, Ryan Bars, talks about the IBMers, and these are employees as influencers. And they don't want to be called influencers. They do not want to be called that. But what they do want to be is they know their stuff. They know their stuff, and they want to be seen as experts in their field. And they're so their level of authenticity and value to the IBM customers is huge.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that episode because being a B2B marketer myself, I think that kind of program humanizes the brand as well. I mean, it isn't about just individual personal brands. And I think some organizations shy away from encouraging their executives to create personal brands for fear of losing them or for fear of distraction or whatever. But I think that it humanizes your organization because people get to know your people.
100%. I mean, I love it when somebody says we're hiring and it's not come from the HR person. It's come from a regular guy that's on the, I don't know, the sales floor, production line or something. It tells me that, goodness me, it's they're passionate about the company that they are from, and it's we need great people in our organization. And I think maybe the pandemic has had an impact on that, Ian, to be honest. We've become more human, and we want to, you know, when it comes to, there's an interesting stat I'm going to share with you now, amongst Gen Zs and millennials, they trust traditional advertising to the tune of just 1%.
Wow.
So they will listen to their YouTube friends, they will listen to their content creators, their gaming friends, because they have this amazing connection with their audience that oozes relatability, authenticity, entertainment value, all of those things. And that's why I was watching something on TV just the other day, and they were saying, do you watch mainstream TV anymore? And people, they said Netflix and Amazon, and they're not, or YouTube,
Yeah, that was around the launch of BBC Three, I think. That they're going to take that from online to being, and the kids don't care, right? So, and I like what you were talking about there about the influence, because I mean, it sounded like you'd listen to some of the conversations around our dinner table, right? Which is because I've got an 18-year-old who's share, her worldview is formed by what she learns on social, not what she learns through mainstream media or from the advertising that she does not trust.
No,
right?
well, that's true, you see. But this is the reason why the government used influencers during the pandemic for the first time, because they, Dr. Alex, for example, ex-Love Island, now is significant influencer because he oozes trust. But also the younger generation will look up to him because they're a bit anti-establishment in many ways.
Yes.
So how does something like the government get through, or how do governing bodies get through their message when you've got people that aren't literally listening to the radio in the same numbers, watching the TV in the same numbers, yet they will be all over TikTok. So that's why brands are putting millions into TikTok.
Yeah, I want to. So just to circle back to something we just mentioned. So we've mentioned your books. I've ticked that off, but also your podcast, the Global Influencer Marketing Podcast. Tell us a little bit about that. It's also on the Marketing Podcast Network, same as us. So you hear a lot about that now that people listen to this. Yeah.
NPM.
What inspired you to start your podcast, and how's that experience?
It's been a great experience, actually. And I mean, like you, I just love people. I love talking to people. I love listening to their stories. It's a natural place for me to be. And I've had so much fun with it. Met some amazing people, amazing brands. I didn't know how it was going to go. I mean, you do hear sometimes people think, oh, my goodness, I've started this podcast. It's a real ball ache to keep doing. I mean, we publish every 2 weeks. And I'm probably about 5 or 6 weeks out. I have moved a couple of platforms. We're now on the NPM. I have been on Anchor and Buzzsprout. The problem, of course, is that the audience data doesn't travel with you, which is a bit of a bummer. But it's professionally produced. I think that's made a big difference. And as I say, my producer is a radio DJ, which I think in the early days, actually, when I first started, I actually recorded in a proper radio studio, and he coached me about the language, how to interview really well, how to script for certain things, and emphasis on certain words. So that was really helpful, actually. We've become really good friends.
No, I can imagine. I mean, I just started experimenting, and I think the first 5 episodes aren't published anymore because I was talking into the wrong end of the microphone. I think they're so shit. But I've since interviewed all the same people over again, so they're much better quality. But I think that you owe it to the listener to make as much effort as you can in the production, right? Because it really makes a difference. If you're a podcast listener, you really notice those differences, don't you?
Yeah, and I know that. I mean, there have been some imperfections, I won't lie, and that's sometimes because of you, when you're talking to a guest, you can ask them to do all the right things, but it's difficult enough sometimes to get them there, and then the audio isn't perfect, but it's. And I know that's an issue, but I think as well, I started when I recorded it there was like 50 odd minutes. But what has changed is I've dropped that down significantly to sort of 20 minutes, half an hour maximum. One thing that I'm really excited about is I've got my first sort of major sponsorship from the influence. So I interviewed 5 fashion influencers, all with the same theme, actually, influencers that are new retailers. And they've all got amazing stories behind them. But what we're going to do, Ian, is we're going to drop one of them as a special limited edition series. So it's not it's outside of the every 2 weeks. We're going to drop one of them during London Fashion Week, one day.
Nice.
So we think timing of distribution is as important as the creation of the content.
Yes, and all of the things you just said, I'm not doing. So mine's produced by an amateur. That'd be me. I publish on a Saturday, which is the day everybody tells you shouldn't publish. But the one thing I do agree with, absolutely. I mean, it's not that I don't disagree. I know I'm doing the wrong things, but is people start these things like podcasts or blogs, right? and they don't realize that the commitment that it's going to be. And and I mean, brands do this as well. Companies do this, where they try and kick off this new initiative, and if they don't see anything in the first 3 months, they're like, I'm going to stop. They don't get the buzz out of it.
And the traction comes, the traction. I mean, what I tell you is happened is, obviously now I've got a sponsorship package as well. But increasingly what it's done is it's, people see my name and what I stand for everywhere. They see my book, they see my podcast, they see what I'm doing. Yeah. And so one of the most important things about being influential is to being visible online in a very crowded market. You're absolutely right about the fact that people trust. And even if they've not met me, they may well have heard about me, or they, I'd hope it was the right way of hearing about me, because a brand is what somebody says about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, Jason was kind enough to call me the Rockstar CMO guy in his big,
Right. And you are.
All right. So come to our last question, as we're rapidly running out of time. We have a regular feature on the Rockstar CMO podcast called the Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool, in tribute to all the rock stars that threw things in hotel swimming pools. By the way, I had to explain that to a young guest that I had, because they'd never heard of that. But it's our portal to marketing hell for the overhyped trends, BS, and snake oil from this marketing industry we love. What would you like to see chucked into our Rockstar CMO swimming pool?
Oh my goodness, what would I like to? This is the equivalent of that TV show, wasn't it?
Yeah, Room 101.
Oh, Room 101. Room 101.
Yeah, completely stolen from there. Yeah, you're right.
Things that I don't like. Yeah. What really gets to me? I'm just trying to think. Actually, I should have prepared this answer.
It's always the one that catches the guests out. Is there something about influencer marketing that you see and you just cringe and you just hate it, and it tarnishes the thing that you're passionate about?
Well, I mean, yeah, okay. So I think to be fair, what I don't like is an over self-orientated, over filtered, over curated image, because that is what's damaging. Look at me. I mean, I'll tell you what really got my goat actually was during.
Here we go.
Right, it makes me shy. Was what I call the Dubai influencer. Was when we were all suffering in lockdown, and let's be honest, we all were. And you had pictures of people, influencers there, saying, "Oh no, I'm not getting my normal holiday intake." Some of those people were slammed, and quite rightly so, because if you think about it, I think if you're influential and you people are looking up to you a lot, particularly women. A lot of girls are looking up to. They see their influencers as icons. I want to be like that, and I think. I don't like that. I mean, I'm a great believer in do to others what you would do unto yourself. Is be kind, be courteous, be supportive, be there, turn up. And so I don't like it when people lack empathy. Is probably the thing I would. If you could throw the lack empathy, is realizing you may have got 4 million followers, but you didn't one day, and never forget the people that helped you on the way up, because guess what? They'll remember you on your way down.
I love it. What a lovely note to finish on. So we'll chuck the influencers without empathy into the Rockstar CMO swimming pool. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, Gordon, where they're going to find you?
So you can head over to my website, which is gordonglenister.com. Influence Global Podcast is on Spotify, and if you want to look at influencer marketing strategy in my book, it's on Amazon and other leading bookstores. But it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Gordon. And I will include all those links in the show notes. Thanks, mate, and I'll speak to you soon.
Great.
Cheers, Gordon. Bye. Thank you, Gordon. I really enjoyed our chat. An interesting take on influencer marketing and being an influencer. And I will, of course, include all of the links to Gordon, his podcast, and his book in the show notes that you can find on rockstarcmo.fm. Right, time to wind down for the week. And where better than the Rockstar CMO virtual bar, and join my friend and content marketing guru, the chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, Robert Rose, to be transported away with a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar. It is time for the weekend, isn't it? It's nice. It's nice to be sort of kicked back and just to chat about things. So in the bar this week we have, so it's hot here. It is, and which is weird. It's a very weird thing because usually in Southern California we get, it gets, it's temperate here, of course. This is the reason we live here, but it has been hot this week. And so it's felt a little bit like summer. And so I have on the docket for us tonight what we're calling basically a tequila mojito. And I haven't made one of these in a long time. And so I thought it would be a perfect way for us to cool off in the heat. And enjoy something maybe poolside or something like that. And it's ostensibly the same as you might expect a mojito to be. Fresh mint, of course, crushed. Right. A little bit of lime and, squeezed into a glass or a pitcher. In this case, maybe we'll do a pitcher of mojitos. And then, of course, ice. And then now here's the most important part, because normally you would put white rum into a mojito. But what we're going to use is a silver or a Blanco tequila. And usually I'm not too much of a fan of Blanco tequilas, but this particular drink calls for that for sure, because you need that sort of very light taste. And you pull all that together, shake it up, and pour it over ice with the crushed mint and the lime wedges, and you're talking very refreshing drink on a hot day.
That sounds delicious. Well, using the limited resources of my desktop bar, I shall attempt to replicate that very same cocktail for us.
Well, that's fantastic.
Here. And I have a very light English tequila called Hendrick's Gin. You'll be surprised to know. And,
as we often say, the most English of tequilas.
Yes,
yeah.
But before I get going with that, and by the way, you'll notice I'm not using the shaker and everything because I felt that I was testing the listeners' patience with me making a martini. So if I put a bit of crikey, I've put some gin in there with some ice. And what was the mixer that you were using?
We were basically tequila. And then really no mixer other than the lime juice itself and then the mint leaves. Then there's no, okay. I mean, the traditional mojito calls for a little sugar, but again, as I want to say on this show anyway, I don't really do sugar in cocktails. So
no. All right. Well, as it's show 101, I've done a bit of a reset with my desktop bar, and I seen the return of very similar ingredients muddled together by the good people at Fever Tree. And they've called it cucumber tonic water. So
cucumber tonic water, yes. Yes, about the closest thing to mint leaves that you're going to find probably in the UK right about now.
All right, I'm going to give this a sip. Oh, that is refreshing, Robert. I see what you mean. And what are we calling that?
We're calling that the tequila mojito.
That's delicious. I could drink one of these every single week.
I suspect you could, yeah.
So and we forgot this last week, where are we sipping these? You mentioned by the pool, anywhere specific?
There is a place that I have been looking at, and this was funny. I was looking at this place while it was cold and rainy here, and it's a place I've never been, actually, which is Rio de Janeiro. And it felt like the right place to enjoy a tequila mojito, and especially a place that I've heard about and seen, of course, on photos and television and whatnot. Copacabana Beach, which just looks spectacular from the pictures and from the way that it's filmed. I have never been there, but I think it would be a great place for us to go and stick our toes in the sand and drink mojitos.
I think we would fit right in with the beautiful people down there.
Yeah, they are beautiful. There are a lot of beautiful people there. That is absolutely the truth. Yeah.
My sister-in-law's been, so I've heard tale of down there. It sounds absolutely beautiful, as you say. Have you ever been to South America at all? I mean,
I've not. I have not been to South America at all. Full stop. Yeah, I am, and have wanted to go for a long time, and have never really found the excuse. So.
Splendid. Well, if there's anybody out there that needs content marketing experience down that way, then give us a shout.
Pay me to go to Rio de Janeiro. I'd be up for that, or Peru. Quite frankly, I'm a big fan of Peru as well.
No, it sounds splendid. So somebody has we're on Copacabana Beach. We're drinking these very fine tequila mojitos, and we're cooling down. What is the conversation going to turn to this week, Robert?
Well, I think you'll be shocked that we'll talk a little about content strategy. I mean, I know that's such an odd topic for us to talk about.
Exactly.
You know, this is something I was thinking of the other day as well with, you know, where I live. I live in LA or Hollywood, if you want to call it that. And there is an old trope around Hollywood, you know, and you'll even see it on bumper stickers on cars and T-shirts and that sort of thing, which is, you know, but what I really want to do is direct. And and it basically refers to actors and musicians and writers and basically those that, you know, that work on films, because interestingly, and this is why I was actually looking at this, ironically, up until arguably the last couple of years, film was sort of the, you know, the feature film was sort of the highest pinnacle of any career. And the director of feature films were the most celebrated, right? You know, it's why Best Director is the second to last behind Best Picture in the Oscars. And, you know, the director is really it, right? So, you know, celebrated film directors are sort of the auteurs, or considered the artists of the film world. And so the interesting thing, though, is that it's a very ironic thing that the director's role is probably the furthest from actually direct creation of any of the content. And, you know, all their job is to do, you know, they don't write, they don't, you know, act, they don't play the music, they don't edit the film, they don't even point to camera in most cases. Now, I know there are directors that do double duty here, but ostensibly the director's role on a film is to direct the individual artists so that it comes out with a consistent, engaging, wonderful voice. And the best directors do that task so well that they basically pull the individual artist's voice out and mesh it all together into their own style, which is a fascinating talent if you really think about it. And that really rang true to me for what a true content strategy is. It is at the end of the day, like film, a director's medium. A B2B or B2C content strategy for a brand is a director's medium. And the reason for that, and the reason I say that, is because I was talking with this client and they were talking about scalability. And, you know, as is usual, the complaint about scalability is, hey, we want to be more strategic as a function, content marketing or content strategy in our business, but how do we become more strategic without adding more headcount? You know, how can we take on more content? Because it feels like this never-ending treadmill. And I started to write this thing down, which I've now started to call Robert's Law of Content, which is you never will, right? My Robert's Law of Content is basically the need for content expands in direct proportion to the number of resources allocated to it. And, you know, in other words, it doesn't matter how big your content team is, you'll always be behind in terms of the amount of content being demanded of you. And so very much like a director on a film, the real functional strategy of content in a business is not to just sort of try and scale all the individual artists to the point where you can meet that demand. It is rather about creating a team whose function is like a movie director, where it is about guiding, shaping, and developing everyone at the edges of the business, their talent, so that they can actually create the content at scale. In other words, It's about pulling out the individual talents of the salespeople, the customer service people, the CEO, so that all the content that's getting created at every part and in every corner of the business is in that consistent, engaging style to do that. And so at the end, my advice to my client there was to say, hey, listen, what you should do is basically get all your staff t-shirts that basically say, but what I really want to do is direct.
I love that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, and also the authentic voice of other people outside the marketing team are actually often the people that are far more interesting to talk to for your customer or for your audience, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It is, that's where really the magic happens, right? When you see a great content strategy is when the business itself has a style, right?
Yeah.
In other words, it's not, and it's easy. And we've talked about this on the show before, where you look at different outputs from different parts of the business, and, the thought leadership is very, conservative and staid, and and it's very straightforward and by the book, and here you go, and it's kind of boring and doesn't really have a distinctive point of view. But then you look at some of the marketing stuff, and it's playful and fun, and it's got cartoon characters, and and you're like, those two things don't really go together very well.
Yeah.
And the greatest ones, the ones where the really the magic happens, is when you look at the entirety of the journey. And everything sort of matches to a great style, a unique voice. Yeah. It's engaging. Experiences are connected with one another. And I think the only way you can really get there is if you actually empower all of those little corners of the business to create stuff, but you do it in a way where each one of them is adhering to, and by the way, willingly and trustingly adhering, not just, because it's, they have to check a box, or that there's brand police or whatever, but they're adhering willingly and trustingly to the voice that of the quote unquote director, which in the business's case is the content strategy team.
Yeah. But isn't that, I think it's really interesting, because doesn't that, because typically in my experience, a content team they have a background in writing. Some of them are a little introverted. They're creators. This is a different skill set, isn't it? Being the director, or being the editor, being the curator, being the person that's going to light a fire under somebody else to do the writing. Does that change the sort of skill set you need within your content team then?
Well, it can, right? I mean, because again, like a director, right? You might have, in any one individual business, you might have the writer director, or the actor director, or the producer director, or, those kinds of double duty talents that you need in order to make a great movie. And in order to make a great content strategy, your content team may more or less create actual content, right? I know some content strategy teams that create zero content. Their whole remit is basically just to ensure that the standards, playbooks, guidelines, et cetera, that are being done are done so in a way that enables everybody else to create content. And their only job is to just ensure the great flow and the great consistency of content. That's rare, where it's zero content being created. But to your point, in some cases, it does change fundamentally what you do as a content strategy team, because in many ways, what you're having to sort of evolve into is not just a team of, editors, or a team of journalists, or a team of writers. You have to start to understand, how do you enable someone else to become a writer or a journalist? It's sort of bringing your expertise to bear in and helping the organization develop its own skills to be able to do that. So it does change it, because it goes from being sort of individual contributor to teacher.
But also, to your point about scale, maybe, when the organization is smaller, then you start off with that typical content type of team, but as it grows, you grow it with directors rather than more creators. Am I making sense?
Yes. In the, obviously not a binary choice there, right? And your mileage may vary on that strategy, but the overall arching goal is what you just said, right? Which is, as you start scaling into the business, The idea is that you become an enabling organization, a movie director, as it were, rather than a single, function, right? Otherwise, you end up where my client ended up, which is, everybody recognized them. Everybody saw that, oh, that's the content team. If you need good words or good pictures, that's where you go. Right.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all they were. So they were never considered strategic, and they were never considered, even though they were considered important, they were never considered strategic because it was simply, if you need something written well or you need something designed well, you go to that content studio, quote unquote. And instead, if we really want to be strategic as a leading function in the business, our overarching goal needs to be enablement, not just service.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, that I've seen that tension as well in organisations I've worked in, but I also think that sometimes you need to reframe that is because when people talk about becoming strategic, what's the point of becoming strategic, right? So I think you need to articulate, well, look, if we became more strategic, we could scale the content. The content will actually improve in relevance because rather than marketers writing it, it's being written by people who understand this topic. And try and frame the conversation like that. Have you seen any, do you see what I mean? It's like executives seem to have become a bit blind to the idea of, it needs to become more strategic. Well, do we need to express better how and why?
Yeah. I think that's, it's a little bit like asking why accounting needs to be strategic, or why the legal needs to be strategic, or why, marketing or sales needs to be strategic, right? At the end of the day, it's like, it's sort of a self-evident thing. It's like, if you're going to do something, why not do it well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in some cases, I might argue, it'd be pretty rare, I suspect, but in some cases, it may not need to be, right? In other words, if content marketing or editorial or thought leadership or whatever is going to be and continue to be a tiny piece of your portfolio, and you're a small company where, you've got really talented people who can create great things, maybe it is just a haphazard sort of thing, and it doesn't need to become a strategic function in your particular business. I think that's exceedingly rare these days with as many channels as we have and as many assets as we need to produce, and as the need for content exponentially rises and in terms of differentiating. But I'm sure there are examples of that out there where we don't need it to be strategic. It just is. It's okay to be a function in the business.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and I think that we come to this topic quite often, don't we, about the fact that content teams need to figure out a way to move from being that content vending machine of, if you want some copy, just give those guys a shout. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? To becoming a strategic part of the storytelling of the brand. I think that's really important. Thank you very much. Yeah. And where can we find thoughts like this written up in some kind of format?
Well,
by a director.
I'm sure there are many places you might find it.
What if you were directing?
Yes. Not the least of which is our little movie production on the web, which of course is contentadvisory.net.
Fantastic. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, Roberts, where are they going to find you?
Oh, all the places, LinkedIn, Twitter, all those places, podcasting, I'm there. Do a search.
We haven't found you on TikTok yet, though.
No, we have not. I have been a little busy, a little cobbler's kids there, busy type of thing. I have not gotten to my TikTok videos yet. But I do actually plan to at some point.
Splendid. Well, I know also I heard you on a podcast the other day by somebody I'd interviewed on this show, Eric Fulweiler. I thought that was a good show. I'll include a link to that in the show notes as well, where you were talking about content. That was good. And of course, the name of his podcast just slipped out of my head as I ad hoc decided to plug something. But I'll include a link to it in the show notes. I thought that was great as well, Robert. Well, thanks very much, mate. And will I see you in the bar next week?
You will indeed.
Thank you, Robert, our little sprinkle of Hollywood there, who I heard was described this week as the likeable Mark Ritson. So that's a wrap on episode 101 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track, and jiving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Jeff, Gordon and Robert for sharing their insight. Please follow them, say hello, and check out all the links we discussed in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.fm, where you can also find all our previous episodes. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Let me know. We are Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn or Twitter, and please drop a rating or review in your favourite podcast app so other people can find us. Or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff and I will kick off a new series discussing the fundamentals of marketing. I chat with Chris Lynch, CMO of MindTickle, and Robert will be back in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.